It is one of the most well-remembered storylines of the comic. The final hurrah of the original run, one of the biggest shakeups in its entire history. Something that would go on to change the very status quo forevermore. And I absolutely hate it! For the longest time, this particular storyline has been held up as one of the best examples of the comic's writing, and one of the few stories used to defend Ken Pender's skills as a writer. While there's been a lot of re-evaluating of it since the whole lawsuit that forced a lot of beloved original characters and storylines to be retconned out of existence, and people started saying, it probably wasn't that great, I'm about to go full hipster on you here, and say that I hated this storyline since the beginning. This entire arc is bad. It is very, very bad. Which is a shame because yes, the story does mark a major turning point for the series. I just wish the gravity of what happens in it was pulled off better. And yes, to anyone who is going to say this, I'm aware of the history of this particular storyline and the multitude of setbacks and rewrites it had, and I'll be going over bits and pieces of it as we cover each issue. But while I find the behind-the-scenes troubles interesting, it does not change or excuse the fact that we were delivered a subpar product. It merely gives context to the train wreck. But it's still a train wreck. Oh boy, is it a train wreck. One thing that I certainly can't take away from the storyline is that the covers for each issue are all, almost always fantastic. This one included. Not the first time that we've had Sally in mortal danger on the cover of the issue, but it's a cover that becomes a bit more chilling in hindsight given the events of the issue. The only thing that brings it down is the massive blurb for the endgame storyline plastered under the logo right here, but at least the rest of the cover wraps neatly around it, so it's not covering up or invading the space of anything important, like the characters. We open on another text crawl meant to bring us up to speed with the series' backstory before boldly declaring that this is going to be the final battle between the Freedom Fighters and Dr. Robotnik. Which means about as much at this point as the final in Final Fantasy, but hey, it is actually a pretty good piece of hype. The comic proper begins with Sonic and Sally looking up at a massive tower in front of them, their target for the mission. Sonic uses a grappling hook and his speed to get him up near the top, while the two of them are being watched by the wolf pack. Drago seems less than happy to be working with people outside of the pack, but Lupe just orders him to signal the others, who have brought Dr. Quack along in case of an emergency. Just like to point out that a physician is not the same as a combat medic, but okay. They receive the signal, and Antoine, still sporting his new no-nonsense persona, makes sure that they only move when they get the signal, and not a moment before, though the others seem to have much more confidence in the pack's abilities. Back with Sonic and Sally, Sonic gets a little concerned as Sal seems to be getting a little lightheaded. We get a flashback to a conversation she had with her now-healed father, remember that from the special? It turns out he thinks Sonic is a traitor and tells Sally that the Hedgehog will go with her on the next mission so that he can ascertain the Hedgehog's loyalties. It's almost as if her father was a stranger to her. Sally starts to climb down a rope, but Robotnik is watching them, apparently predicting their movements, and activates a wall full of automatic turrets, who are all pointing straight at Sally as she's halfway down the wall. Thankfully, Rotor is there to lend an assist, using that massive gun we saw a few issues ago to start taking out the turrets. Antoine sees Sonic, who seems to have come back out of the vent he was crawling into. Everyone thinks he's there to help, but to everyone's shock, he cuts the rope holding Sally. And then we get an admittedly very good sequence of panels following Sally as she careens down to the ground, nothing but a thin awning slowing her descent as she slams into the floor. Bunny immediately jumps out to try and get her out of the danger zone, and the wolf pack charges forward to take out any of the robots and turrets still firing on Sally's location. Meanwhile, we cut over to Robotnik and Snively, who are celebrating the apparent death of one of their enemies by just leaning back and acting like they could light up a cigarette at any moment. But then Sonic shows up. The real Sonic. Yeah, I don't think I'm spoiling anything by telling you all that that wasn't the real Sonic that tried to murder Sally. Shocker, I know, but bear with me here. Robotnik doesn't waste much time and just pieces out with Snively, leaving Sonic alone to destroy the command center, while Robotnik activates the room's self-destruct sequence. Back outside, the rest of the team witnesses the explosion, but don't really dwell on it that much considering that they have a teammate barely clinging to life at the moment. Dr. Quack says her heart is incredibly weak and she's barely alive. And you know, most of her bones are probably broken despite how pristine her body looks, but there's only so much you can show in a comic marketed to kids, I suppose. The team evacuate the area, with the Wolfpack providing cover fire as they get back to the tornado and take off, with only Tails wondering what the heck happened to Sonic. And then Sonic happens by where the tornado was, wondering where everyone else, most of all Sally, is. He dashes back to Knothole, worried. Cut back to a very happy Robotnik, hurrying into a new command center in southern Robotropolis as he orders Snively to get him something to drink, and he starts tapping away at his keyboard, eager to see the action, as he calls it. And back in Knothole, everyone paces around nervously outside the ER, waiting to hear what the doc has to say about Sally. He walks out, closes his eyes, and from this panel it's pretty evident what state she's in. This was one of the big reasons why this was supposed to be a shocker of a storyline, but well, we'll get into that when we get there. Sonic bursts in a moment later, and no one there can say anything to him, just looking at him in stunned silence. And then Jeffrey shows up, accusing Sonic of murder and treason, and he's led away, as he tries and fails to defend himself, and not a single one of his friends says a damn thing in his defense. Cut to later that night, as Drago walks into a random cat's hut. Yeah, we don't actually get to hear this character's name at all during this issue, which is weird because she actually plays a pretty significant role in the events that just took place. Her name's Hershey, and she's apparently Drago's girlfriend. And he seems unabashedly sinister tonight. The next morning, Sonic is brought before the king and all of Knothole to face judgment. It's not so much a trial as it is the king pronouncing sentence. Despite Sonic's insistence that he's innocent, and with no exchange of evidence or anything like that, the king decides not to have Sonic killed owing to all the good he's done for Knothole, and instead has him sentenced to life imprisonment in the Devil's Gulag prison. And again, not a soul speaks up in his defense, as Snively and Robotnik look on via a monitor that seems to have a camera right behind the frickin' king, if this shot is to be believed. So, hell of a start, huh? It's a pity that the cracks are already starting to show. First off, the obvious point, how are Robotnik and Snively keeping tabs on all of this given the fact that they are still not supposed to know where Knothole is? I know I've brought up this sort of issue before in some of the earlier storylines, but here, in what is supposed to be an incredibly serious storyline, the fact that he just has a plot convenience monitor setup is really off-putting. And given the reveal that we get later down the line, that just makes this off-putting scene even more blatant. And then you have Drago, who is so transparently evil that it's actually pretty laughable. You'd think Hershey would see through him right away with the way he's behaving. At least when he was first introduced back in issue 46, he was mostly just an asshole, but he is gleeful in how sinister he is here. But the biggest problem with this issue, which is also a massive problem with the whole storyline, which is a problem considering it's a linchpin of everything that happens in the next 3 issues, is the framing of Sonic. First of all, we've already seen this done several times already. Sonic's had, 3 or 4 different doppelgangers trying to usurp his identity at this point? Some subtly and others not. Knothole at large is aware of the alternate reality with the evil duplicates, and that Robotnik is capable of making robots that look like and are able to relatively accurately imitate existing Mobians. The Freedom Fighters have dealt with both on multiple occasions, and not just for Sonic, but others as well. And that's to say nothing of the multiple times Sonic's been brainwashed or controlled at this point too. So why, with all of that in mind, does no one stand up for him? Not a single one of the Freedom Fighters doubts what they saw on that tower despite the absolute absurdity of it. Let's just toss out the fact that we've seen this whole Sonic getting framed scenario before and revisit the fact that you all have known Sonic since you were children. You survived the coup together, and you have been fighting against this despot well before you were teenagers. Not Antoine, not Rotor, not Bunny, hell, not even Tails. Tails! Sonic's best friend, comes forward to testify on his behalf. I mean, yeah, Sally's apparent death is more than a little bit of a shakeup for your group. You're all probably in shock and trying to process the grief at this point, but I refuse to believe, after everything that has happened, that no one in Knothole is willing to give Sonic the benefit of the doubt and at least entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was something fishy going on. Strap in, folks, because I'm going to be bringing up this point a few more times during this storyline, that's for frickin' sure. In terms of artwork, we've got the usual suspects of Art Mawhinney on pencils and Barry Grossman on colors, though we have ourselves a new inker in Pam Eklund, and if I can give this issue anything, the artwork is still very well done. For the most part. While overall I do think it's very good, it is a little inconsistent with what's happening in some of the panels, where the characters just don't look like they're showing proper emotions. I don't see extreme sadness here, and I certainly don't see outrage here. It doesn't help that more often than not, the background characters look like they're just struck completely dumb. Well, that was a start, and we're only going to dig deeper from here, folks, when we take a look at issue 48. See you all next time.